My name is Melanie Dizon. I'm the Director of Education at the Davis Phinney Foundation, and we are here today for our YOPD Council. Today, you might see a new face if you're relatively new to the YOPD Council, because Gaynor used to be on our council and now she's back. She's hopping in. This is a super fun conversation and topic. And so we're all giving a cheers. There's a coffee in this one. There's a wine in that one. It looks like Kevin has some sort of coffee. And we're going to welcome Gaynor back. So I'd love to do a quick sort of roundabout for the people who are new, and I'll just call you out and you can say who you are, how long you've been living with Parkinson's, and if there's anything else that you want us to know. So Gaynor, why don't you get us started as our special guest for today?
Lovely to be back, Mel. I'm Gaynor Edwards. I run a small but perfectly formed charity in the UK called Spotlight YOPD, and these people are lovely, and I miss you all.
Glad you're back.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We miss you too. Robin.
Hey, I'm Robin Morades. I'm out of Charlotte, North Carolina. I was diagnosed Friday the 13th of 2015. 11/13/15 was my D-Day. So that's good to be with you guys.
Thanks, Robin. Kevin.
Hi, everyone. Kevin Kwok dialing in here from Boulder, Colorado. Gaynor, I just want to say, once you've been a YOPDer, you're always a YOPDer.
Forever young.
Great. Tom.
Yeah, I shaved and I shaved 10 years off my my age, so
You
I'm
really
definitely a year now again. I'm coming to you from Denver today. I'm with Jenna Deedle. We're at the Neurodegenerative Congress meeting here today, and I'm taking a break out to be with y'all. So good to be here.
Oh, awesome. Thanks, Tom.
Good to see y'all.
Heather.
You're looking fresh. All right. Gaynor, it's so good to see you after all this time. Welcome across the pond with us. And Kat, I'm glad you finally got in. I had some trouble. If we don't have technical difficulties, if you don't feel at home, I'm Heather Kennedy and I write as Kathleen Kiddo. And I haven't written in a while because I'm getting used to dictating things, which is really a different kind of writing. And so it goes. We do adapt, and I was diagnosed in 2011, but I didn't believe it until 2012, even though I'd been having symptoms for 10 years.
Wow. Thank you, Heather. Kat.
Hello, everybody. I am Kat Hill, and I am in Portland, Oregon. And what else were we saying? I was diagnosed at the age of 48 in 2015. And it's lovely to be here and to be back here after being here earlier.
Yes, exactly. It's basically like 2 dates. We're having 2 dates today.
Yeah.
Okay, so today we are going to be talking about communicating about Parkinson's, and there's a million different things that we could talk about as it relates to communicating with Parkinson's. Interestingly, as you know, Gaynor used to be on our YOPD Council, and she saw the topic and said, I'm really interested in this. This is something that I love talking about. So I would love to start off with you, Gaynor. And is there something in particular, like when I imagine you seeing the topic and saying, oh gosh, I have something to say, like, what is that piece around communication that feels super important to you?
I think, well, there's several areas to it, but one of the main things is that's your key to being confident in still being out there. Once you can talk about it, you can be out there, you can socialize, you still have a life. It's once you want to kind of, keep it and hide it, and you're not comfortable talking about it, then you just limit life generally, I think.
Yeah, that's great.
But there is a specific thing that I want to come in on. I recently yesterday, in fact, was hauled over the coals regarding benefits over here, and trying to get the benefit system to understand properly. So it's how do you actually not just communicate, but how do you convey what Parkinson's is? Because it's just not understood. So I kind of have this analogy that it's like, if you have an old style car and, the head gasket goes, well, fine, that's one issue, and that's fine. But if you've got a modern car and the computer system goes, and at one point it's kind of right, I'm going to stop your ABS from working. And then the next time I'm going to stop your power steering from working. And then you kind of stop the car, you restart the ignition again. You're right for a little while. And then something else happens and it decides, right, I'm going to just turn your hazard lights off, or I'm going to jam your gear into reverse gear. And that's kind of the analogy of it. So how do you convey that? Other than, let me tell you about a car.
Let me tell you about a car. Okay, this is great, Kat. I think this is something that so many people struggle with. So can you talk to us a little bit about what you were trying to do? Because everybody in watching this has issues with benefits and trying to get their benefits, well, whether it's disability or just their insurance to pay for things. What was it specifically you were trying to do? And then do you feel like you resolved it by being able to communicate? And what were the words that you used to get there?
Sorry, you said Kat to me or Kat?
I'm sorry, I meant Gaynor.
Okay. Well, it's an ongoing process. I ended up by, bless her, that the woman who was trying to help me ended up in tears. We were both, you know, a little bottom lip going, because, you know, she was in an awful situation as well. So we've left it that I'm going to write something and then she'll send it on for me. And it was just this evening, this afternoon, I was kind of pondering the whole thing and thinking, that's where I came up with the car analogy. So to be continued, you're going to have a part 2 of this.
Okay, I love it. And that car analogy is so good. And I saw everybody shaking their head and laughing like, yeah, you're just going to go in reverse right now. Okay, apparently that's where we're going, right? So does anybody have anything to share around that piece with trying to get that communicated in the healthcare industry, Heather?
I would add to Gaynor's analogy or metaphor there by adding this. When you finally get your car to the shop and you're like, it's doing this and it's doing that and it's not doing this or that when you get to the car shop. So you get to the doctor's office and you're fine for that hour. And then you leave and everything falls apart. So that's another frustrating part of this disease. Also, the car itself is carrying some precious cargo that has nothing to do with the car. Like our souls, we know that, you know, our souls are what we're trying to carry, and our vehicles are becoming a cage. The car becomes then a cage. Not only do the wheels pop off, we can't go anywhere. We're watching the world from the cage. So I guess in terms of benefits, I don't have a lot to add, but I will say that it is extremely difficult to be educating the person who's supposed to be helping you while you're trying to get help. And that's what we face time and again. That's why advocacy is everything. We need advocates. Without my advocates like Kat, like Gaynor, like all of you actually, you've all advocated for me at different times. Without you, I wouldn't even be able to get through the mire of my healthcare paperwork. And I'm lucky to even have it. So let's just start there, you know? Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And I think the key, that's a really important thing. You know, all of you on here have movement disorder specialists, and you're lucky, right? Because a lot of people with Parkinson's don't. And the communication is a little bit easier when people have a movement disorder specialist, because you walk into the doctor's office and you're fine. And you're like, no, wait. And they're like, no, I get that. Maybe primary care physicians and other people that work with you don't get it. And that's what the majority of people, those are the majority of people that are working with our community of people with Parkinson's. And so having words to help them describe what that is super important. Kevin, you have your hand up?
I forgot what I was going to say. I'm having a Parkinson's moment here. What I do know about this whole issue with disability is the ability to accurately talk about your illness. One of the things that I feel very stifled about is that, you know, as active people trying to control your Parkinson's, we do things that are sometimes outside the norm. You know, like we might run marathons, or we might do great hikes, or we might bike or ski or do something else just to push the limits. And what I find really frustrating is that the disability folks can sometimes use your communication of pride in what you can do against you. And that just bugs the crap out of me. I'm sorry to say, but I don't like to stifle myself, for that reason. But I feel like somehow they're the decision makers on our outcome. And so we sort of play this game, which I find really reprehensible. Enough said.
Well, and I'll just add on to that, as a lawyer, this is why I need a lawyer who knows what magic words. There's sometimes you just have to include the magic words in your application or in your advocacy. And usually it's a lawyer who's going to know what that is. So.
I would add.
Oh, sorry. I just want to quickly chip in. Kevin, if that wasn't your point, it's a very good point to come up with on off the hoof.
Yeah, I think my doctor focuses on the words chronic and degenerative, and we're not going to get better per se, but like Kevin says, you go out and you do some things, and it takes you a long time to do that thing, at least for me anyway. But it's a shame that they can use that against you.
I think also. Oh, go ahead, Kev.
Every couple of months, I get a notification from my insurance people. Are you better yet?
Ooh.
And then you have to show justification. And this is clearly, if we lost a limb, lost, our vision, that would be a definite, disability.
Right.
But somehow these silent diseases where you can't necessarily see it, become something that we're constantly battling.
Well, and it's the way that the disability insurance system is set up. It's kind of set up for an acute situation that gets better over time. And if you try to look at it just from people are just having to push through paperwork and rubber stamp things. I mean, you might have to argue about what it is you're trying to get and advocate for yourself, but a lot of times they just have to submit a form showing that they did what they were supposed to do, and it's just part of the whole system. Social Security Administration stuff is that way as well. It's kind of kooky. Big bureaucracies make it difficult.
True.
Yeah, it's we're guilty until we can prove that we're innocent. It's just like, it's frustrating.
Yeah, and dehumanized constantly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Gary's bringing up a good point that if doctors use the word treatment instead of management, sometimes you have to educate your healthcare provider about, things.
The language to help us make our case.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Grace Strong has been saying that for a long time. Thank you for repeating that.
Mm-hmm.
It is indeed management, treatment and not management, or it is treatment and not cure.
Right.
Thank you.
Kat, did you have something that you wanted to add?
I wanted to say also,
Yeah,
sometimes we're working so hard to stay positive, to stay in the moment, to focus on what we can do. And I know that that's so much a part of who I am, that sometimes even for me, I get into this, I'm only going to paint the good picture when I go in. I want a good report, right? And so I think we also need to be honest with our providers and sometimes even be honest with ourselves a little bit about where we are. And I know that's been hard for me. And it took me a couple of years to get through the disability system here and doing a lot of dance and ultimately hiring an attorney and an advocacy group to represent me, because the dance felt so negative. I don't want to paint a picture of all that I can't do. I want to focus on what I can do. But it certainly impacted my ability to do my job safely and well and consistently. And
Exactly.
and it's hard because you don't want to focus there, right? Yeah. I don't have any answers.
Yeah, Gaynor and then Kevin.
I think also you go from a situation where you're trying to convince yourself and everyone else that you're fine in your work situation. And then you get to the point where you're not fine in your work situation and you have to turn that around 180 degrees, don't you? And actually all that stuff which you've been, covering up, you got to push it out there all of a sudden. And it's also things like, when did degenerative become progressive? It's that sort of positive spin on stuff.
And the word progressive associated with Parkinson's is really odd to me,
Exactly.
We're progressively getting worse. I don't know. I always looked at progressive.
Good job.
Crazy.
Mad.
Kevin.
One of my, you guys are hitting all my pet peeves today. But the other pet peeve that I have is someone else, I think, Kat, you mentioned it earlier, is that with Parkinson's, we can sway the moment of how we are just by positivity. And I find myself not always being honest, and sometimes having someone else. My girlfriend comes with me to all my appointments now because she says, that's not what you meant. I even compete with my UPDRS performance with my movement disorder specialist, trying to ensure that I can do things more than I can. But the one thing about communication that I thought was really important was, like, for instance, these calls, these webinars, right? We can man up and we can perform, we can get our voices strong. And then right after we finish, my girlfriend will come in and say, how'd it go? And it's like, I got no voice. I can't talk right now. I need to sleep. And it's one of those things that sometimes our partners don't realize, that we man up for these kind of events and then we're fried afterwards. I don't know if other people on this panel feel the same way.
Oh yeah. I always tell whenever I talk to other folks like myself that were diagnosed with Parkinson's and the peer-to-peer kind of stuff, I suggest they always bring their spouse with them. Like, my wife keeps me honest. So when we go to the appointment, she's always there. And that way I can't tell a fib or I can't perform. And if I do perform, she kind of brings it right back into reality for me and the doctor. And that's a good thing. I think that's a really good thing. I've mentioned that to a lot of guys on the phone that I've talked to, and they said, you bring your wife to your doctor's appointment? I'm like, yeah, you really should too. So it's to your benefit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually didn't invite my wife for the first decade of my Parkinson's. And that was to my detriment, because I deliberately pushed her out because I didn't want her to hear the negative things.
Heather has her hand raised.
That's a big one. Let's get back to that one. But Robin.
I was gonna say Heather had her hand raised, and then I have a point after Heather.
I didn't see your hand. It's like the same color as your wall.
I know. I'll have to make it like a bright color. What I was thinking about was the humiliation that comes often for us. So if we bring a partner who's not a long-term partner with us, it can be even more humiliating. I mean, we're talking about all kinds of things in there that are not really easy to discuss. And what if we haven't shared every single thing with them, and yet we're very honest with our doctor? And by the way, not all doctors can be trusted either. I don't mean with the HIPAA, I mean, I've had doctors who've said to me, have you seen a therapist in response to my DBS not working? I'm like, you put this in my brain. It doesn't work. You can't program it right now. I need to go see a therapist, which is probably also true. But that's beside the point, Doc. And would you say that to a dude? I don't know. Would you say that to someone who is more your peer, or are you looking down on me because I'm being emotional right now and getting upset after a year and a half of not having the DBS working? Also, another thing that I noticed is if I'm very quiet, like Kevin describes, they'll say, ma'am, is she listening? I'm like, I'm just slow. I'm not stupid. I can hear you. I'm slow because I can't get she'll say, I need your card. I was at an office the other day and she was yelling at me, and I brought a friend with me this time, and she couldn't believe, my friend was like, she thought I had been exaggerating all this time. And this was in the urologist, not to be confused with neurologist. Anyway, I'm going to give them a little piece of my mind in the form of a letter. Not that anybody will read it, but it'll make me feel better temporarily, because you need to be a good advocate for everyone and say, hey, guess what? dignity is important. Thank you.
Well, and to that point about putting things in writing, several people in the chat have said things like, how do you start this dance? Or, wow, my doctor makes very minimal notes in my record. So this is where you get to be your own advocate. Since the beginning of my situation, I wrote down all my major symptoms I was having, and I gave it to my doctor on the paper, and I said, here, I want this as part of my medical record. Also, those email chats that they have, these portals now, these patient portals, I think it's really important to sort of switching the gear now into sort of just standard care. It's really important that you dictate the terms of your medical appointment with your doctor. And so what I do, one of the strategies I do is whenever, I don't write down stuff every day, but if I'm having a particularly difficult flare up of something, so this past week I had my first bout of dystonia in my back muscles. That was fun. And I couldn't even walk. I was in excruciating pain. But, you know, I'm just taking a note to tell my doctor to talk about it. And I also email in the portal, this is what's happening. We need to talk about this at my next appointment. So it becomes part of your record, and you're making sure it becomes part of your record by giving the paper to the doctor and saying, I want this as part of my record, that we've talked about these things. So I also think that, I don't know, my anecdotal observation is I really believe women are treated differently in the medical system than men are. And when I went for my very first appointment of like, something's wrong, I literally had a neurologist tell me, you're not impressing me. And he was kind of rolling his eyes at my reports. And then at the end of the whole thing, he said, well, we're living in a first world country. We'll use a first world solution. We'll get you an MRI. And I said, look, if you think I'm being a hypochondriac and that this is just nothing, then, and I declined the MRI. I was like, you know, if I'm just, you know, imagining this or whatever, but my chiropractor insisted that I go back and see him about 6 months later because my chiropractor had noticed that my tremor had increased. And I went back, they had a last minute cancellation on a Tuesday morning appointment. So I got in really quickly. Well, my previous appointment had been on a Thursday at like 4. And the difference in the energy was astounding. The doctor was polite, professional. And I said, look, you can see my tremor is worse. He said, I can see that. And I said, when I was here last time, you said to me, and I told him what he said to me, and he was horrified. He was like, I said, what? And I said, yeah, you told me that I wasn't impressing you and that it was a first world. We're living in the first world, so we'll do a first world solution. And so at that point, I started becoming my own advocate, and I realized it was so difficult for me to get a proper diagnosis and care. I mean, he put me on, I mean, it's just interesting to me. He gave me a bunch of samples of Ryteria to give me the levodopa challenge. And so, and he referred me to a movement disorder specialist at Beth Israel. And anyway, that was neurologist number 3 by that point. And it was like so hard to bushwhack my way into getting good care. And that by the time I got to neurologist number 4, I was still on the levodopa challenge. I mean, this had been going on for 6 or 8 months. And the neurologist number 2 was still giving me Ryteria samples. I mean, it was crazy. And I told neurologist number 4, I said, listen, if you're going to be my neurologist, I need to know that you're going to call me back, because if we're going to try some different medication, I cannot wait. If it's not working, I can't wait 6 months to see you again for that medication to not work. And he was sort of nodding his head. Also, he was a way better neurologist than the other 3, but he was like nodding his head. And I literally said, I want you to say to me, Robin, I promise I will call you back. And he said, Robin, I promise I will call you back. And I'm glad that he made that promise, and he did, because he put me on ropinirole. And that was a very short-lived experiment. But I feel like I have to be pushy. And I used to work in the medical system, and I've advocated for all my elderly relatives because I worked in the medical system in a sort of an adjunct way. And so I know that they needed advocacy, and we need advocacy too.
I think we all have to be pushy if we want to make progress with this.
Yeah.
And
I've
people
made
aren't
it-
vocal enough, are they?
I've made it a point to pursue mainly women doctors. I think all my doctors, except for one, is a woman, because I think what I've noticed is they care so much more than the guys do. I'm not sure if I'd ever go back to a male doctor unless I absolutely had to. So I mean, even my
interesting.
dentist is a woman. Because again, they care more. They think about things more. They're not there to impress anybody. It's exactly the opposite.
That's fascinating. And Gray says, I second that. Chris says, I agree. Interesting. I mean, obviously, case by case, but certainly something to think about if you continue to not have success with a certain doctor. I wish that we could do a day in the life of everybody here, and then we just send these videos to all the insurance companies and all the primary care physicians. And we're like, here's what a regular day looks like. Does this seem like this is like somebody who should be going to work 8 hours a day and 12 hours a day? No, they're
24 hours a day.
yeah, right. That's crazy. This is a good, so Pamela Quinn. Hi, Pamela. So glad you're here. What do you do when your doctor glosses over something you bring up? My impression is that they are unwilling to admit that they don't know the answer.
That's my impression too.
I think it's fair to come back to it. I think it's fair to say, I know I touched on this, but I really didn't hear an answer. What are your thoughts on urinary frequency, or, constipation, or tilting to the side, whatever it is? I think it's really fair. You are paying for their consultation. You are a consumer of healthcare. And having been a provider, knowing that patients can pick and choose who they see, you can do that. And if you don't get the answers that you like consistently, it's okay to change providers. If you don't like a grocery store you shop at, you go somewhere else. We are consumers of healthcare. You pay, or our insurance pays for the service that they're providing. If you don't like the service, change the venue.
Yeah, and I think that I would suspect it's the same in Canada. In our country, we are told from the very beginning of time, doctors are up here and we are to believe what they say. We believe their advice, their everything.
Oh.
And so we're not as used to challenging them. And you certainly don't get used to challenging your doctor in your early years. You just don't. You just go and you're used to getting the provided care, and then you move on. And you have to start really early holding them to what they're saying. I mean, this is especially true in like the world of nutrition. Doctors will tell you the craziest stuff. And you're like, well, you don't know anything about nutrition. You had like 4 minutes of nutrition class when you were in medical school, and you're talking about things that have been, clearly not the case for decades. And it's fair to question them and to make sure that they're not just, and a lot of them aren't expecting it, right? Like I would suspect that a lot of you have had interactions with doctors. They weren't expecting you to call them out. They weren't expecting you to say, hey, this is not right. And some of them will respond, right? So yes, find the place that's going to treat you the way you deserve. Gaynor and then Tom.
Just to say, that can really chip away at your confidence as well, can't it? If you have a doctor who, it's just little things, like maybe in the letter that you get back, that you get copied in from maybe your movement disorder specialist to your primary care doctor, if it works that way over there, that's how it is in the UK. They might say something like, patient complains of. I wasn't complaining, I was,
That's
commenting.
standard in training though. Yeah, and it needs to change instead of complaints of, because I took those notes for decades in school and when I was a nurse practitioner. That's a standard way you start your note. And you can ask your provider to say, can you just say patient reports instead of complaints of? And I think that's really fair, because it's called a chief complaint. That's why you come into the office. And so our whole system, from the very foundation of how providers are trained, are given that language, and you talk about changing our narrative, physicians over time are going to need to change their narrative. And I think we can be direct with them, and it doesn't mean you have to get in an argument or be confrontational. It just means that you can have a dialogue with them and ask for certain things. And you can even just practice saying, oh, I want to partner with you in my healthcare. Even if it starts to feel uncomfortable, I just want to partner with you in what we're doing. This is my body and my experience. This is my Parkinson's. I want to partner. That's a non-threatening word. So I sometimes even have to practice before I go in. You know, these are the things I want to say, and I want to be sure that if it gets difficult, I just want to use these words. So even write it on a notepad if it helps.
Yep. I do the exact same thing, Kat, and I use that same terminology. In fact, I actually interview my doctors before I go to them. So if I'll narrow it down to a few, like when I saw Olga Klepetskaya at the University of Colorado for 11 years straight, and she was practically became a family member. And then one day she left the practice and went into research, and I was like, oh, what am I going to do? So I said, you can't leave until you give me a couple of references. And so she gave me a couple of references, and I interviewed them all. And actually, truth be told, I'm now seeing Dr. Drew Kern, a guy, but I see him primarily because he's in Boulder and that's close to me. And we've gotten along real well. I gave him a year to see how it would go. But there is a continuity point through the physician's assistant, who's a young lady who connected the two doctors for me. And it was really very smooth, but it took work. I didn't just accept whatever doctor they were going to pass me off to. So again, you have to advocate for yourself, and you have to be knowledgeable enough to know what kind of questions to ask. So you got to understand what it is that you're having, what you're dealing with. And I think that's the best path forward for people with Parkinson's.
Yeah. And I just want to make a quick note for the people who are watching that do not have choices. The keys there are to remember, like the things that everyone said. Make sure it's in your record. Use it in the email chat. Take the list with you. I gave you the link of all of the worksheets. Take those, print them out, fill them out, and take them to your doctor and put them in your record. Right now you might not have a choice, but you might have a choice soon. And so everything that you're doing is preparing for that. So, okay. Was that Kevin? Did you have something?
Yeah, so I wanted to echo what Tom said. I recently switched over all my care providers from California to Colorado after moving here. And I see several of the same people you mentioned, and they're all stellar. But the point that I wanted to get back to is what Kat talked about, is the training of clinicians. As a clinical pharmacist, we were taught what's called SOAP notes. SOAP is an acronym that stands for subjective, objective,
assessment, and plan.
And the subjective is always patient complained of X dystonia. And what they do is, if you read the notes on someone who's been trained during my era, you'll see very methodically how they go SOAP and every complaint or symptom that you talk about. And what happens oftentimes is you lock into the symptom and you don't think about the totality of the patient. And that's what I find very frustrating about. God, I have a lot of frustrations today, huh? But I find that SOAP approach is very antiquated when you talk about someone that has every system in the body involved. So let's change the medical system, right?
I'm on it, bud.
Yeah, that's
And the
gonna go
insurance system. That's all.
Oh, good luck with that. Right?
Two
Yeah.
tasks.
We're getting close to the end. I want to honor everybody's time, but I want to go back to Kat Gaynor, what you said at the beginning, because I think that this is I'd love to hear other people's experience with it. But you started and mentioned the ability to own and to tell people that you have Parkinson's, and that when you do not do that, you suffer and also the people in your life suffer. So can you tell us a little bit about what that meant for you? And then if anybody else wants to share, if there were times where you actually didn't tell people and you held on to it, what was that? And then what made you tell people? So Gaynor, you want to start there?
Well, I know from experience, from other people's experience where they kept it quiet. I came out quite early with my Parkinson's. I put it in my company newsletter 3 months after I got diagnosed. It was the Christmas newsletter, and titled "Charity Begins at Home."
You really took the Christmas letter to a whole nother level.
Exactly, exactly. It told you which ones had read it properly as well. And happy Christmas to you. Right. No, I don't think you paid full attention there. But some people have contacted me and they've kept it quiet for years. And I think that the pressure of that, the lack of information, and I think there's that whole thing about Parkinson's makes you smaller. Well, I think by doing that, you're making yourself smaller, you're making your life smaller. Because to be able to still socialize and talk to people and kind of be comfortable with who you are, that to get to that level of acceptance, it's authentic, and that's what it's all about, really. Otherwise, you're just living a lie or keeping a secret, aren't you?
Does anyone else have a story about that?
I agree with Gaynor. I came out right away as well, and it wasn't I debated it quite heavily because it's a life-changing thing, right? And but I told my business partners right away because I felt I had a fiduciary responsibility to the company that I was partnered in with as an owner, and I owed it to those guys that they knew where I was at. And of course, they asked if I wanted to keep it a secret from everybody else, and I said, well, my staff, I'll just wait till they find out. Well, it was about 2 or 3 days later. Someone must have found out, but it was just so much easier to go through without having to hide behind the curtain. It was just so much easier to be upfront with people, and they were very gracious and very accommodating and very helpful. So I couldn't see anything negative about doing that. I know that may not be true for everybody, but sure, it worked really well for me.
I took the other path. I did not tell anybody until I had deep brain stimulation. And I have
so
a very
long was that period?
5-6 years. So not that I didn't tell anybody, but like in my work life, nobody knew at work. It was very much a secret. And it was in some ways, I felt very isolated because I felt like there was like a plexiglass wall, like a cone of silence or something, that I knew something and they didn't. Not that all of the details of my life are fodder for everybody's, viewing pleasure, but there was a point when it started to feel dishonest by not being my most authentic self. And yet I don't think I'd do it any different way. Some people are treating me a little bit differently now. Usually I could be like jovial at a quarterly bar meeting, laughing and talking with people, and someone will have not seen me for a couple months, and the first thing they say is, "How are you?" It's like, "I'm fair to Midland. Do you see me socializing with all these people?" And so it does change the way that people interact with me, but I'm comfortable now. I think that some people are shocked at how cavalier I can sound about certain things, but it's just the reality of my situation. So I took the opposite path, but my life didn't get smaller because of it. It was just I had a very public position. I did a lot of public speaking across the state, and I just didn't want it to be the first thing people know about me. And a lot of people still don't know, but I'm definitely out now.
Kevin.
Yeah, I'm with Robin on that. I was, in a service industry role where you feel like if you tell people, they'll treat you differently, and they do. But I'd have to say the trade-off of being honest and coming out at the time of my DBS really was liberating. And that liberation is worth a lot.
I was always real impressed with the response I would get. People would be kind of shocked at first, especially the guy on the airplane that I had to stare down with because I froze in the aisle. And he's like 10 times my size. And he's like, "What do you want, buddy? What do you want?" I'm like, "Dude, look it, I'm not looking at you. I'm frozen." And so later on, he came back down the aisleway and sat down next to me. He says, "Do you mind if I sit down?" I said, "Sure." He goes, "Tell me more about Parkinson's. My great grandfather had Parkinson's. I think it may run in my family." So it turned into an amazing education moment for me. I was like, I can't believe this guy is like back here sitting next to me now. But that was really, really kind of cool. But I've always found that people will kind of treat you differently. But the other thing that they always say is, "Well, I got this or I got that." And I always tell them, we all got something, right? In Parkinson's, it's what I got. It's what I got. It's certainly not the only thing I may get, but right now that's what I'm dealing with. And I, extend a hand and an olive branch.
Right. Heather.
I love when that happens, Tom. I was going to say that, but I also wanted to add, there's something else that happens. It's not as simple as you just tell them you have Parkinson's. Oh, it's all good now. They have no idea what that means.
Yeah.
They're like, "Oh, you shake a little? You okay? Yeah. Okay, great." The next day, "You seem better." And they're watching you. And I like to do
I
the
didn't see the
thing.
guy get on the airplane.
Yeah, it's like, what? What do you mean I seem better? You mean like the last 5 minutes? It's called medication. Or when parents are with their kids, I like to go, "Psst, I'm a robot." And then I do this. And then when their parents turn back around, I'm like, and the kids are all like, "Mom." It's so much fun. If we don't have fun with it, someone accused me of making fun of Parkinson's one time. And I'm like, you know what? It's so that I don't cry. You don't want to see the ugly cry. Isn't a laugh a little bit easier? I mean, what are we going to do? When I've been frozen in the aisle like that too. And the guy actually thought I was hitting on him. He goes, "Hey."
That's great.
like-
The guy thinks the guy is ready to fight him. And the guy thinks the woman is trying to, hang out with him. That's great.
The
We'll have to
last
start traveling together, Heather.
Right. Kevin, do you have your hand up again? I don't know if it went down and came back up.
Well, I meant to put it down, but I'll just echo. I tell everyone that my DBS monitor allows me to read your mind. And it really unnerves people when I tell them that.
Yes. Good. Let's see, we have another really big topic that I want to address, but I think we're going to have to hold on that. We can talk about it. I think we're just going to talk about this again next month because there's just a lot more. I don't even think I got to any of my bullet points, and we had a really great discussion. So I think we can talk about this again. I don't think anybody would be sad about that.
Don't tease us.
Yeah.
I want to do it now. Okay.
And next month,
The only thing is Gainer's got to come back.
Yes.
Please.
I might be
Yes.
washing my hair.
We have a
And
month.
for those of you who are on today and are going to watch the recording, we have a little bit of an announcement, so we're going to share it with you today. The YOPD Council is going to change its name, and the new name for the group is called, the event is called Living with Parkinson's, Everything You've Ever Wanted to Know About Parkinson's, but We're Afraid to Ask. And now we're going to be sharing it farther and wider than we have in the past. We have a lot of YOPD people here, but we also have a lot of people that are not YOPD that come to these sessions every single month. And we just want to make it a little bit more available to everybody so they don't think, oh, that's not for me. All of every single solitary thing that we talked about today is true whether you have YOPD or you were diagnosed, at 70 years old. So those are all important things to talk about, and we will be giving you more information. We have a really cool new logo. I know that no one else really cares about this, except the people that are like putting it out there, but we're excited. It looks super cool. Maybe we'll even have t-shirts, who knows? So that part is great. And I will make sure that I send you all the recordings for everything. Thank you all so much for coming. Thank you, Kevin and Heather and Tom and Gaynor and Robin and Kat. Really great conversation. And I know we'll pick it all up again next month.